here this afternoon. Effective immediately, I'm issuing an emergency declaration to prohibit camping within high crash transportation corridors in the city of Portland. This is the first in a series of mayoral actions that I plan to take to speed the city's recovery on a number of important issues. Today, my focus is on an emergency declaration to prohibit camping in freeway and high crash corridors effective immediately. This past Wednesday, the Portland Bureau of Transportation released its Vision Zero traffic crash report for 2021. It tells a heartbreaking story. 63 individuals tragically lost their lives in traffic-related crashes in 2021. That's the highest total in more than 3 decades. Traffic-related deaths have increased each year since 2018. As mayor, I oversee the city's impact reduction program, which is responsible for cleaning up unauthorized houseless camps on lands owned either by the City of Portland or the Oregon Department of Transportation. In reviewing PBOT's report, I was keenly interested in how our houseless community, some of our most vulnerable residents, might be impacted by traffic-related deaths. In total, 70% of our pedestrian fatalities involved an individual experiencing houselessness, 70%. Our most vulnerable Portlanders are disproportionately affected by traffic-related injuries and death. These are devastating losses of life. These aren't just statistics. These are our neighbors, our sons, our daughters. They're members of our community. We've continually witnessed unsanctioned camping. We've continually witnessed unsanctioned camping in clearly unsafe locations, sometimes jarringly close to roads and freeways. You don't need to be a traffic engineer to sense that that's not safe. Now, the traffic engineers confirm our instincts. Of the 27 traffic deaths that involved a pedestrian, a vast majority, 70%, involved individuals experiencing houselessness. The findings from the Vision Zero report make one element easy to understand. We can no longer justify allowing our most vulnerable community members to be exposed to the dangers of camping in freeway and high crash corridors. This emergency order does 3 things right away. It prohibits camping along high-speed corridors. It prioritizes the work of the impact reduction team to post and remove camps in these areas. And it enables them to keep these sites free of camping with no right of return. This order goes into effect at 3 p.m. today. In the meantime, we'll continue building on the good work underway by Commissioner Dan Ryan and his team with the Safe Rest Villages to fully realize his vision. We will implement our partnership with Multnomah County to offer a safer alternative to camping in dangerous high crash transportation corridors and to help prevent the need for campers to set up other unsanctioned camps in new locations. While these efforts will modestly expand temporary shelter access with local and regional resources, we also need Oregon's governor and state legislature to prioritize funding statewide to address houselessness to provide for more shelter. Portland is by no means the only city in Oregon facing this crisis. It's only the highest profile example. The state must support Oregon cities and counties that are on the front lines of saving lives, reducing conflict, and helping those who are in desperate need of additional housing. I look forward to meeting with my fellow Oregon mayors from cities large and small to figure out how together we can get more help from our state government. And I'm not going to wait to act. As mayor, I will use my executive authority to move us in the right direction in strategic ways like this emergency declaration. There'll be more to come. Additional actions will improve the coordination of services to the unsheltered. They will improve the city's system for cleaning up Portland and keeping it that way to help address other key challenges we face. That's the end of my prepared remarks today, but it marks the beginning of my team's redoubled efforts to lead us to shared public safety and shared prosperity. Thank you very much. And Rich will open it up for Q&A at this point. Thank you all for being here.
Thank you, Mayor. Before we move to the next piece here, Mike Benner, I saw your comment in the chat. Were you able to get that straightened out as far as recording?
No, I'm still getting denied.
Okay, Shuli, hopefully we can figure out.
Yeah, we've been chatting on the side. I'm trying to work on it, but I don't seem to be able to get that one straightened out.
It's okay. We'll figure it out. We can move forward.
Sorry about that, Mike.
That's okay. I think our desk might be trying to roll on something too, so we might be okay. Carry on. Thank you.
In that case, just for everyone, the mayor is going to be taking some questions. Please use the raise your hand function, and I'll call on you. When I do call on you, do us a favor though, and just state your name and the organization you're with. And given the trouble you've had today, Mike, we'll go ahead and start off with you.
Oh, well, I'll take that. Thanks, Rich. Mayor, question is twofold. First of all, we understand that ODOT was consulted in this, but we understand PBOT was not. We spoke with Commissioner Hardesty a few hours ago, who said she knew nothing about this and thought she should, as someone who oversees the Bureau of Transportation. So first of all, can you comment on that? And then secondly, and forgive me if you did mention this and I missed it when I was trying to do the recording part, but how do you plan to enforce this? I think, we've talked about banning camping in different areas and we still see it all over. How do you plan to enforce this new deal?
Yeah, good. Thank you. First of all, this relates to the impact reduction team, which is in my portfolio. I'll turn it over to my Chief of Staff, Bobby Lee, on the other aspect of this.
Hello, my name is Bobby Lee. I'm the Mayor's Chief of Staff. We did present the copy of the emergency declaration to all the Chief of Staff on February 3rd for feedback. We didn't get much feedback at all. We also presented to Commissioner Hardesty's team, not Commissioner Hardesty herself, but the team yesterday as well to review the emergency declaration. Lastly, we also presented to all the Chief of Staff earlier this week around the basic concepts behind the livability challenges.
And I would add to that, Bobby, this is a matter of urgency. People are dying, and that's why I'm using my executive authority. I have respect for Commissioner Hardesty's views on homelessness, but we obviously have some disagreements. But I hope we all agree that leaving people to camp in high crash corridors is unacceptable. And of course, as I said, there will be other aspects of executive leadership going forward, other emergency orders, and I will certainly ask my colleagues for input for the development of those future orders.
Can you elaborate on the enforcement piece of this?
Yeah, so the impact reduction team will be required to post for 72 hours. They will then commence cleanup, and if people try to return, they will be asked to leave. What I hope, what we find is, for the most part, when asked to leave, people will move. Keep in mind, we're talking about high crash corridors, areas that are clearly unsafe where people are dying, and this encompasses about 8% of the total area of the city.
All right, thanks, Mike. That's Mike Benner from KGW. Alex, can you just state your name and organization you represent first?
Yeah, hi, this is Alex Olinsky with the Portland Mercury.
Hi, Alex.
Hi, one of my questions, you mentioned this is one of many mayoral actions to come. I'm curious if you could give a timeline as to when we should expect more, and if one of them specifically will be a plan to open any larger outdoor, indoor shelters that will hold more than 60 people.
With regard to this particular executive order, people are asking, where are people supposed to go? And the answer I have is somewhere safer. We know that people are dying in these areas in disproportional rates. We currently have beds in the shelter system. We're working with the county to identify another 100 shelter beds that could be reserved specifically for this purpose. And just a few minutes ago, I got off of a call with the governor where I made a pitch for thousands more shelter beds, which are desperately needed, temporary shelter here in Multnomah County, consistent with the kinds of investments that are being made in California and Washington. And we're asking for that temporary shelter over the course of the next 3 years until the Metro money is deployed in the community. Again, this is about getting people out of areas that are clearly not safe.
So, sorry, could you mention or could you explain kind of the time frame of other mayoral actions to come regarding this?
As quickly as possible. This is an urgent issue, and it demands our immediate attention.
One last thing. Could you explain the urgency around this? I mean, people have been dying unhoused in Portland for years, despite whether or not they're by streets that are busy or not. If this is such an urgent issue, wouldn't you agree that putting people in homes and putting people in offering, emergency housing would be a better option than just forcing them to relocate?
I have never been shy about my opinion. We need to, as quickly and humanely as possible, get as many people off the streets as possible. And I don't believe there's anything humane about leaving people in high crash corridors where, with this report that we just received this week, it's been made very clear people are dying. And so I approach this from a sense of urgency and immediacy. We have to address this issue right now.
All right, thank you, Alex. And if you guys can do me a favor, just so I can keep track in order here, after you've asked your question, just go ahead and lower your hands, same button to raise. If you have another question, just go ahead and raise it again, and then I'll put you back in my queue. Kendra, I think you're up next.
Hi, Kendra Kent with KPTV. I would like to know, can you go into more detail? You said like this will encompass like maybe 8% of the city. Talk a little bit about the criteria to determine, what a dangerous road is. And then also, how will you determine how close a tent can be to a dangerous corridor? And I'm kind of thinking of like along I-5 on the embankments, some of them are very close, but then some of them are kind of up more in the hill. And it's like, what is too close?
We, in the chat, have just sent you an actual map with these corridors.
Is that your full answer?
Yes.
Can you just expand a little bit more on like how close you can be to that area? Or is it just like along, I haven't looked at the map yet. I apologize, but.
Yeah, I'd refer you to the map in IRP. I'm not sure on exactly how many feet, but clearly the goal here is to remove those camps that are in the corridors on that map. So I don't know how many feet it is beyond that, but certainly the focus is on those high crash corridors.
Thanks.
And those are specifically defined.
And Kendra, we can follow up with some more detailed information on you on those questions also. And Sophie.
Hey there, this is
Hi,
Sophie. Hey, with Willamette Week. I have sort of a two-part question. First is more process-based. So will this be a complaint-driven process, and will Hucker be prioritizing these sweeps over sweeps at other camps that the city deems high-impact camps?
These are absolutely a priority because people are dying in these particular areas.
So will these jump the line from other camps that have been submitted?
I would also point out that we've actually substantially increased the funding to go to Hucker. We've now, in this last budget cycle, increased the number of vehicles from 8 to 14. We've actually doubled the capacity of their ability to clean up camps that are most problematic. So I believe we'll still be able to do the other work, but we have additional resources coming in that we can now dedicate to this purpose.
Okay. And then can you explain, I'm still unclear about why the other council offices in PBOT were not briefed about this until yesterday. From my understanding, this has been in the works for over a couple weeks now. I know ODOT has been briefed on it, has been in discussions with the mayor's office for weeks. So I think I'm unclear as to why the other council offices were not.
The other council officers were certainly aware of the fact that I was looking at an executive order. They were aware of the fact that I was deeply concerned about these particular areas, but we actually did not finalize the executive order until literally the last couple of days.
Okay, thanks. My understanding was that Hardesty was not even aware that this was in the works, or that this was.
I'd refer you to my chief of staff's earlier comments.
Sure. Okay.
Thanks, Sophie. Megan?
Hi there, Mayor Wheeler. Megan Allison, Great K2 here. We know that the danger of these camps has been an issue for a long time. So why did it take your team up until this point to take this action?
My team has been very aggressive on remediating the most problematic camps. I have fought hard to get additional funding for the impact reduction program. I've worked tirelessly to bring additional short-term shelter online. I've worked with my colleagues at Metro and Multnomah County and elsewhere to advocate for additional funding from the state for these purposes. So this is something that has absolutely been a priority. But with the resources we have through our last budget process and the budget that we just passed in conjunction with the county, combined with the information we have now from the Vision Zero report, that makes it clear this is a priority area and it demands immediate attention. And I have the authority through my emergency powers to make this a top priority, and I'm making it a top priority.
And I guess just as a follow-up, would you say the biggest hurdle in the last year then is budget in making this happen?
I think there's also been a systematic bias towards the long-term development of affordable housing, which obviously our community desperately needs. And for some time, I've been something of a lone voice, saying we also need to act with urgency to get people as quickly and humanely off the streets as possible. And I feel that the tide has turned. I believe the public supports this direction, and I'm seeing improved collaboration with other levels of government, at the county level, at the regional level, and the state level to get it done.
Thank you.
Thanks, Megan. And next we have Lindsay.
Hey, Lindsay. You're muted, Lindsay. We had to say that once. It's a Zoom call.
Oh, there we go. Sorry. Terrible me. Sorry about that. Thank you. So I did have the same question as Kendra, because I was wondering if people are posted and then they move back like 10 feet. Is that good? So
they'll be asked, if they move back in, they'll be asked to leave.
And then how is the enforcement of this going to be different from some of the other camps that we've seen where they're posted and then a week later they're back?
Well, the difference is you have to start the process all over again if you're not using the terms of this executive order. Under this executive order, the impact reduction team has the ability to move people quickly out of those areas if they return. There's no right to return here. And I want to be clear, the vast majority of campers move when they are asked to move. The sort of ultimate stick here would be to arrest somebody for trespassing, but we all hope and expect that won't have to be the case here. Again, we're talking about limited areas in the city that are very dangerous, where nobody should be, where people are losing their lives. So the focus here is to get people out of those dangerous areas.
And then I know you mentioned, where do these people go? And you mentioned 100 more shelter beds coming online. How soon could we see that?
Well, we currently have shelter capacity, of course, and we're working with our colleagues at the county as expeditiously as possible to identify up to 100 beds that would be reserved for this particular effort. But as I say, we need thousands of temporary shelter beds. That's just the reality. We have thousands of people camping in our community in unsanctioned camps. And under Martin v. Boise, which we honor, We want to be able to provide people safe and humane alternatives to living on the street. So we are asking overtly our governor and our state legislature, let's mirror what California and Washington are doing to support the establishment of significant shelter capacity in our community. And there will undoubtedly be some emergency orders in the not too distant future focused on that aspect of this as well. And again, I offered this morning to meet with the governor to discuss this, and I look forward to that opportunity.
Thank you, Lindsay. Rebecca, I think we may have accidentally lowered your hand. Did you still have a question?
Yes, I definitely did. Mayor, you can hear me. There have been a lot of polls coming out lately. I'm thinking one from the Portland Business Alliance and a few from People for Portland, really showing that Portlanders are kind of historically unhappy with the state of the city, and also showing support for a more aggressive approach to moving campers. Can you speak to what influence those polls, specifically the PBA poll and the People for Portland poll, had on this announcement you're making today?
The polls had no impact on the announcement I'm making today, other than to underscore the urgency of the issue and the anger and frustration that our constituents have about the lack of action. But let's be honest, when I ran for re-election last year, I heard that same anger and frustration amongst people who live in this community. And I've said many times, and I feel this quite sincerely, I share that frustration. I share that anger as somebody who was born and raised in this community, who knows what its potential is. To see its current state is utterly disheartening. And I have made this my top issue for the last 4 budgets. I have said this is our number one issue, and we need to do a good job. And this is just one more tool in the toolkit to get it done.
All right, thank you, Rebecca. And Shane, you're up next.
Hi there, Mayor. Shane Dixon Kavanaugh at the Oregonian.
Hey, Shane.
So I just want to ask, or just have you elaborate on this a little bit more. I mean, Portlanders have heard you describing the homelessness crisis in our city as a humanitarian crisis that requires a FEMA-like response for more than a year. You said just now that you have been a lone voice up until recently on the need to focus on immediate sort of solutions. You've had these emergency powers at your disposal this entire time, yet have never chosen to use them. And in fact, you've used an emergency declaration to ban the sale of fireworks before you used an emergency declaration to address homelessness. Why is that?
The reason is quite simple. We needed the resources in place to be able to do the remediation. And I fought really, really hard during my last budget process to double the capacity of IRP, the impact reduction team, to get the personnel in place, to have more outreach workers in combination with the county through the navigation teams. You need to have the resources on the ground in order to be able to execute effectively. And we now have those resources, or at least some of those resources that we need.
And then one other question with this particular emergency declaration, since it does revolve around what's described as inherently dangerous camping locations, can that apply to more than just high crash corridors in this declaration? Can that definition?
This declaration is very specific. It refers to freeway and high crash corridors. And that's not to say there won't be future declarations, but this one is fairly narrow in its scope geographically.
Thank you.
Thank you, Shane. And Sophie, you're back up.
Yeah, this is Sophie Peel again with Willamette Week.
Hi, Sophie.
Hey, Mayor, you mentioned that the city honors the Martin v. Boise ruling. How are we honoring Martin v. Boise if we've continued to sweep camps despite not having enough shelter for everyone? And why does the city care to come in compliance with the ruling now, you know, when it hasn't stopped us from conducting sweeps for the past 4 years?
Yeah, I'll defer to legal counsel on that, but I'll give you one piece of it. Martin v. Boise was in the context of a city that was citing people for homelessness for camping, and we're not.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Sophie and Rebecca.
Hey, sorry if I missed this, but you talked about no right of return. What does that actually look like? Are there penalties? Are people stuck?
It means we're not going to let people come back. What we've seen in other parts of the city is if we remediate a camp for public safety, public health, or environmental reasons, it takes about 10 minutes for people to start coming back. And we're making it very clear that that is not going to be acceptable in these areas. If people return, they'll be moved.
So, but to be clear, no penalties. It's just you tell people to move and you strongly tell them to not come back.
Look, the goal here isn't to penalize people. It's the goal here is to move people out of dangerous areas where they can be killed. That's the bottom line.
Thanks, Rebecca. And Alex, Rebecca.
Yeah, could you explain how this order kind of ties in at all with thinking of deciding to make a buffer around Safe Rest Villages? And, you know, I guess just is that another piece of this bigger puzzle that you're putting together?
That's not part of this program here today.
Okay, and then just one more thing to follow up on what Rebecca was asking. Will you be physically blocking off spaces? I know that in the past when people have attempted to return to places that have been swept, their barricades go up sometimes or construction flagging to keep folks from returning, I guess.
Yeah, so that would be an ODOT decision, but I absolutely support the idea of fencing off highly dangerous areas where people should not be camping. And I will absolutely advocate for the state to do that.
All right, thank you, Alex. And Megan, you're up next.
Sorry, one day we'll get everything we need here. So I know that the conversation about resources in the city has been ongoing in the last year. So how are you ensuring that there will be enough resources within the navigation team to enforce this?
And to be clear, the navigation teams don't, just Megan, so we're clear, the navigation teams are actually people who work to get people into shelter, into housing, into other services. So they will be there more on what I would call the service provision or connection side of this. They will not be part of the impact reduction team efforts, which is really about cleaning up the litter and restoring the sites. And in terms of how do I make sure there's enough resource, keep fighting for it, keep working with the Multnomah County Chair and the county commissioners to continue to support funding for this kind of programming and work with our nonprofit partners who provide some of those services. It's critically important. What we learned, the navigation centers are successful. We have a couple of those here in the city where people, they go in, they're connected immediately to services, potentially housing, mental health, substance abuse treatment, domestic violence survivorship services, youth services. But not everybody's going to come into one of our navigation centers. So the theory behind the navigation teams was to go out into the community where people are and connect them to services. And it is absolutely our intention here that when we post a place, we're going to try and find an alternative location. And as I say, we are working with the county to reserve beds for this purpose. Not everybody will take a bed. I completely acknowledge that. And ultimately, we want to get them off the streets. And that's the goal here, is getting them out of these high crash corridors where they can be injured or killed.
And just a quick follow-up on that. So, you had mentioned that you're fighting for these resources right now. Given that, do you expect that this is going to take some time before we see impacts from this plan?
Yeah, of course. None of this is going to happen citywide quickly. We will deploy the resources. People will slowly start to see the results, and hopefully over time, with a consistent approach, people will see the impact. But people shouldn't expect to see a big difference in the next 2 weeks, 3 weeks. But over the course of the months to follow, people will see the difference.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Megan. And Christian.
Hi there. I just wondered whether people are just going to be moving from, next to the highway onto a sidewalk next to a store, and is that just one of the things that's going to happen here?
Kristen, this is always the problem with remediating camps, is if you don't have an alternative, people just move somewhere else. And I acknowledge that in the absence of adequate shelter beds, in the absence of other alternatives, some people will pick up and they will move somewhere else, which isn't really solving the larger problem, but it does solve the immediate problem, which is we need to clear out these areas that are high crash corridors and transportation corridors where people are getting killed. So let's keep the hierarchy in mind. This is saving lives. The next step is let's get people off the street as quickly and humanely as we can, and we're working aggressively on that front as well. And as I say, I'm looking for not just a marginal increase in the shelter options available in this community. I'm looking for thousands of beds. And I have seen California jurisdictions be successful in working with their governors and legislature. I've seen Washington jurisdictions being successful working with their legislatures and governor. We should do the same here. And that's why I put the ask overtly on the table this morning in my meeting with the governor to partner with me to get it done here in Oregon. And again, it's not just about Portland. There are cities, large and small, all across this state that are really struggling right now under the weight of this issue. And it's only going to get worse unless we make the investments and put into place the programs to get people quickly and humanely off the streets. And from my perspective, leaving people in high crash corridors is not a humane approach at all, period.
Thanks.
Thank you, Christian. And Sophie, did you have another follow-up question?
I did. Yeah, I promise this will be my last one. Mayor,
not a problem.
in response to
this is your job, so and this is mine.
So in response to Rebecca's question, you said, we're not going to penalize people for camping along roadways or
certainly don't want to.
So again, and I know I'm harping on this, but it just sort of baffles me. Why does the city care about Martin v. Boise now if we don't cite people along roadways unless the city is planning on doing that at some point?
We have always cared about Martin v. Boise. So, when I look at the work of the impact reduction team, keep in mind it requires posting. We do our level best to connect people with services. We are required under the city's code to collect people's personal belongings and hang on to those. I will acknowledge that across the board, we need to do better on all fronts, but those are the strategies that we've employed. And we're going to continue to do our level best to make sure that people have alternatives. But I want to be clear with regard to this particular executive order. Anywhere is better than where people are camping. These high crash corridors and an immediacy to speeding automobiles, in some cases in the middle of runoff zones and in the middle of traffic medians. We need to get people out of there, and we need to get them out of there now because it just isn't a safe place to be.
I think it's my confusion comes from a place where, you say Martin v. Boise is applicable to cities that are
the main thing here. Look, I don't have a lawyer looking over my shoulders here. The main thing is people are dying because they're camping in dangerous places. And this executive order gives my bureau, the impact reduction team, the authority that it needs to move quickly to get people out of those areas. And we will do our level best to give them options, to give them other alternatives, a shelter bed or some other option, a connection to services. We'll do our best. But right now, the key thing, the top of the hierarchy, is let's get people out of areas where they can die.
Thanks.
Thank you, Sophie. And Alex?
Yeah, you mentioned you want to prioritize getting people out of a dangerous place where they can die, that being along high crash corridors is not a safe place to be.
That's what the data shows.
Right. How will you ensure that these folks are relocated to a safer place, not to another spot where they could be hit by a car or maybe, be injured in another way?
Well, all of the high crash corridors are subject to this executive order. And Rich, did you put the map in the chat? I think you did.
Yeah, we did. We copied that full report.
All right, I actually can't see the chat, so.
Okay. Was that it, Alex?
Yeah, I guess also just to follow up, that high crash corridors, are they both PBOT and ODOT lands?
Correct.
All right, thanks, Alex. And Rebecca.
I just have a quick timeline question. Was this in the works before, this emergency order that you're announcing now, was this in the works before you saw the PBOT report, or did it only start after?
This started before at the staff level, and keep in mind I have a team of individuals working on solutions to quickly and humanely get people off the streets. So there were various aspects of this that were being percolated at the staff level.
Okay,
before the report. The report literally just came out. The report, honestly, it buttresses what we already strongly suspected. It just gives us the factual. It gives us factual data in addition to the anecdotal data that we certainly had.
All right, thanks, Rebecca. And I don't see any other hands up at this time. I'll just go and explain a couple things real quick, and if any hands pop up, we'll call on you before we close out here. As I mentioned earlier, there are two documents in the chat. One is the draft of the emergency declaration that the mayor will be signing at 3 p.m. today. There's also a file containing the Vision Zero report that was produced by PBOT. And Alex, you got one more question?
Yeah, I do. I just wanted to follow up on the first question I asked. I wanted to see if there is any way you could comment on if there is a plan in the works to create large mass shelter indoors with more than 60 people.
We are looking at all options around shelter. And while we've acted with urgency, I think it's clear we have not acted at the scale necessary to address the problem. So we are looking at larger scale solutions across the board.
Okay, that looks like all of our questions that I've got. Thank you, Mayor, for making yourself available for those questions.
It's my job. Thank you all for being here. I appreciate it.
Thanks, everybody. And if you have any follow-up questions, go ahead and send an email to wheelermediarequests@portlandoregon.gov, and we will try to get those answered to you as quick as possible. Thanks.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great afternoon.